Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro called to defend peace and popular sovereignty after heading the ceremony for the creation of the National Electoral Commission, which will elect the justices of the peace. The U.S. government vetoed on Wednesday a United Nations Security Council resolution demanding a ceasefire in Palestine and the release of hostages. And with 2 days to go before the end of COP29 in Azerbaijan, rich countries have not yet proposed any figures to achieve the goal of tackling climate change. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from TeleSUR Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro called to defend peace and popular sovereignty after heading the ceremony for the creation of the National Electoral Commission, which will elect the justices of the peace. The Venezuelan leader assured that the best way to safeguard the social, political and economic stability of the country is to advance in the structural goals together with the people. Likewise, Maduro emphasized that it is necessary to build a new state of new social foundations in order to create what he called a society of equals. The president also affirmed that the election of the judges of the peace in over 5,000 communal circuits next December 15th will be the main tool to exercise popular sovereignty.
We have the task to build a new state, a new basis, and a new society of equality and freedom. In a sovereign nation, when the time of God is perfect, the time of God has arrived for the justice of peace, and Venezuela is at the forefront, setting an example for the peoples of the world.
In Venezuela, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez denounced that representatives of the far right seek to attack the country's economy during her participation in the Venezuela 2024 Oil Chamber Forum. During her speech, the Vice President questioned the actions of the extreme right that support sanctions and blockade against Venezuela, since they cause damage to the country's economy and therefore to the Venezuelan people. It is worth mentioning that the forum deals with the hydrocarbons industry's perspective in Venezuela and how to advance towards operational excellence in terms of safety, environmental impact and maintenance. Furthermore, Rodriguez described the bill passed by the U.S. Parliament that offends the name of the liberator Simón Bolívar and violates national sovereignty as an attack against Venezuela.
A bill that strongly bears the name of our liberator father, Simón Bolívar, is simply inadmissible. It is aberrant. Ms. Machado came out today to applaud that bill and to thank Reed Scott, to thank him, because, well, they listened to her. Her wishes were listened to. Who will think of asking to harm a people, a population, as a wish? Who will think of that? It is the same thing I said in my press appearance on Monday about Mr. Eric Prince. You know, a notorious mercenary who has in his record, in his resume, murder and torture. It is shameful that someone is known to be a murderer, isn't it? That is very embarrassing, being known for being a mercenary, but Ms. Machado applauds him too and thanks him for attacking Muscat.
Venezuela's Vice President Delcy Rodriguez stressed that the Venezuelan people are ready to carry out a work plan to promote the development of the hydrocarbon sector in the country.
We are ready, and the sectoral vice presidents of PDVSA, with its president at the head, are also ready to sit down with you and work on a roadmap. We want a work plan that emerged from there to register the companies, certify the companies so that they can add to the development of the hydrocarbon sector in Venezuela, and that we say before the world, Venezuela first, Venezuelan productive sector first, and then with much love we will undoubtedly welcome our brother from the world so that they can also join forces side by side with our workers, with our professionals, side by side, to give the great impulse towards a powerful Venezuela. That is our strategic objective, to dream about the future, about a very near future. It is the Venezuelan power. It is what our people deserve for the history, for its resistance, for its courage, and for its dignity, and you deserve it too, and that is what I invited you to do so.
On Wednesday, ALBA TCP issued a statement rejecting the passing of the Bolivar bill by the U.S. House of Representatives. The member states of ALBA TCP categorically repudiate the passing of a bill which seeks to intensify the criminal and illegal economic blockade against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and which has had the abuse of calling in the Bolivar Act. According to the mechanism, the bill targets the most vulnerable Venezuelan population and also seeks to hinder the economic recovery of the country and to impede Venezuela's economic relations and cooperation, in addition to over 930 unilateral and extraterritorial coercive measures already imposed against the Venezuelan people. In this context, the Bolivarian Alliance demands respect for the Charter of the United Nations and the norms of international law, as well as for the will of free, independent and sovereign peoples, and calls on all sister nations to condemn the act. Earlier, the Attorney General of Venezuela, Tarek William Saab, announced on Monday the formal setup of a Committee for Justice for the Victims of Fascism, July 2024. The initiative of the Venezuelan government aims at continuing the investigations to clarify all the acts of violence unleashed by extremist sectors after the July 28th elections. The Venezuelan official denounced the campaigns that let the world imply that the arrested people were all supposedly innocent, while the deceased and the wounded, as a consequence of the violence of the extreme right, were intentionally made invisible. Saab stated that the objective of this committee is to explain clearly and unequivocally to the Venezuelan people a fact that has been distorted by the media.
We are in this important meeting to formally create the Committee for the Justice of Victims July 2024.
El Comité por la Justicia de Víctimas, Julio.
An important effort that, as you can see, has the participation of personalities linked to the human rights issue.
Que como ustedes pueden observar, tiene la participación.
That will provide a highly organic, spiritual, legal and technical support to the relatives of the victims of that fascist violence.
Orgánico, espiritual, jurídico, técnico, a estos familiares de las
that shook the country
de esa violencia
because they didn't want to recognize the electoral results.
porque no quisieron reconocer los resultados.
In Uruguay, presidential candidates are on the brink of entering onto the election silence period. Earlier, Yamandu Orsi, representing the Broad Front, will lead a mass rally in Las Piedras, Canelones department. Orsi, alongside his vice president running mate Carolina Cose, will partake in a caravan. People will gather at the Legislative Palace to start the march, then they will go through the capital city on their way to Las Piedras. Participants will begin the mass ceremony around 7 p.m. local time. On Friday, November 22nd, sets off the election silence, which bans both proselytism and political propaganda before the runoff of November 24th. Likewise, the Uruguayan presidential candidate for the National Party, Álvaro Delgado, will close his electoral campaign on Wednesday in Montevideo. The closing ceremony of the Republican coalition will take place at the obelisk of the capital at 7 p.m. local time. At the brink of the election silence, the ruling party will seek to convince the still undecided voters. For the official closing of Delgado's campaign, the presence of the former presidential candidates of the coalitionist parties has been announced. And now we have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates and more. We'll be right back, stay with us. Welcome back. The U.S. government vetoed on Wednesday a United Nations Security Council resolution demanding a ceasefire in Palestine and the release of hostages. The Western country representation justified the veto, reiterating the alleged lack of link between the draft and the immediate release of hostages. In addition to an immediate and unconditional ceasefire and the release of Palestinian detainees, the proposal called for a complete Israeli military withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, allowing for repopulation. The veto marks the fourth time Joe Biden's administration has blocked a United Nations Council Gaza ceasefire resolution since October 2023. Palestine commemorates World Children's Day amidst Israeli violence, killing, displacement, starvation and child abuse. The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, highlights that Palestinian children are among the most vulnerable victims of war. Indeed, they suffer from devastation, lack of access to health, education and food. Namely, 96% of Palestinians go through such aggravating conditions daily. The Ministry of Education and Higher Education reported that over 11,000 students have been killed in the Gaza Strip, while at least 19,467 have been injured due to the Zionist ongoing incursion that began in October 2023. The Israeli army launched new airstrikes on the city of Palmyra in Syria, killing at least 36 people and wounding more than 50 others. The air raid targeted several residential buildings and part of the industrial zone of the city, located some 300 kilometers northeast of the capital, Damascus. The Syrian Ministry of Defense reported that the attack on Palmyra, which has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1980, was executed from the Al Tanef area in the Homs Governorate, which is occupied by U.S. forces. In this context, the government of Syria called for joining forces to stop the Israeli genocidal advance on the territory. The Zionist regime has carried out more than 130 attacks in Syria so far this year, leaving at least 120 dead, hundreds wounded, and also numerous material damage. In Russia, the defense ministry reported that the army repelled a Ukrainian drone attack involving over 40 drones in 6 regions of the country. Authorities said there were no human casualties or material damage in the attacks. Defense officials pointed out that the Ukrainian troops regularly attack bordering Russian provinces with drones to force the civilian population to leave their homes. Ukrainian forces in recent months have increased drone raids against oil refineries and fuel depots. Russian authorities stressed the importance of reaching the goals of its military operation in Ukraine. The spokesperson of Kremlin, Dmitry Peskov, detailed that President Vladimir Putin has repeatedly stated Russia is ready to negotiate possible ways of settling the conflict without neglecting Moscow's goals. In mid-June, Putin formulated several key conditions for starting peace negotiations, namely that Ukraine must withdraw its troops from the Russian territories. Moreover, Kyiv must give up from joining NATO, and it must maintain neutral, non-aligned and non-nuclear status. Russia has been conducting a military operation in Ukraine since February 2022 to defend and safeguard the population from genocide by the Kyiv government. On Wednesday, the government of Nicaragua issued an official statement expressing their support to the Russian Federation. The Nicaraguan government expressed their rejection to the arms sent to Ukraine by stating that the fascist that characterizes the imperialists of the earth, uselessly pretending to continue dominating and destroying the world, manifests itself once again arming its in Ukraine with the dumb and servile applause of the colonialists of the world like themselves. They also condemned the actions of the U.S. by expressing that the United States of America, leading slavers, invaders, interferers, traitors, impostors, and a very long etc., perpetuates its stupid contempt for all the norms of international law and coexistence. In this context, Nicaragua expressed its permanent and indispensable solidarity with the Russian Federation, which fights against fascism and defends peace at all costs, which is the right of all to live in peace, security and brotherhood. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at TeleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings and more. Hit the button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. With 2 days to go before the end of COP29 in Azerbaijan, rich countries have not yet proposed any figures to achieve the goal of tackling climate change. The Colombian Minister of Environment, Susana Muhammad, declared that the progress of the negotiations is slow because a figure has not been proposed for fear that it will multiply over the years as climate change is advancing faster and faster. In turn, the Azerbaijani coordinator of the negotiations, Yalcin Rafijev, urged on Wednesday to accelerate the process of the negotiations to face the climate problem. On the other hand, campaign director for the 350.org non-governmental organization, Nicholas Heidinger, warned that COP29 is essential to do justice to climate change and stressed that without financing, the climate goal will not be achieved. In Georgia, police forces expelled demonstrators protesting against the result of parliamentary elections in the center of Tbilisi city. Citizens occupied Shavshades Avenue in front of the university after the end of an opposition march in rejection of the parliamentary election results. The police arrived on the scene and forced demonstrators to leave the place. The opposition march denounced the manipulation of the results published by the Central Electoral Commission, which indicated that the ruling Georgian Dream Party obtained 53.93% of the votes and won 89 of the 150 seats in the legislature. In this regard, protesters demand an international investigation, a request that was met by the prosecutor's office after it launched an investigation into the fraud accusation. In France, the National Federation of Farmers' Unions announced new demonstrations next week to reject the European Union Free Trade Agreement and to demand higher incomes. The French Agricultural Union said that nationwide protests will take place on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, together with the Young Farmers' Union to denounce the obstacles hindering their work. Both unions resumed demonstrations and road blockades to demand the fulfillment of the 70 measures promised by the government last January. According to the union, the Mercosur agreement would result in a loss of income in the face of imports from countries with lower production costs and fewer environmental regulations.
Our aim is not to divide the farming unions. Each farming union coexists. We at the Young Farmers Union are taking action today with the National Federation of Farmers Unions. The Coordination Rurale Union took action last week. We are all legitimate to take action, and there is no opposition between unions. We all have the same goal, which is to keep French agriculture strong.
In Greece, workers demand wage increases and solutions to high cost of living. The General Confederation of Greek Workers called a strike to request the government to take measures and guarantee a decent life to the workers. Around 12,000 people are taking part in the mobilization, including health workers, National First Aid Center, teachers and professors, judicial officials and ministry employees. The participating sectors warned that low salaries are eroding the purchasing power of workers and retirees in an inflationary context characterized by a high cost of housing. The French meteorological authorities have declared a state of orange alert in 28 departments due to early snowfalls. The measure will be enforced as of Thursday, November 21st, which urges to be cautious and to follow the information issued due to snowfalls and the subsequent formation of dangerous black ice on roads as a result of the passage of the Caetano depression across the country. According to the forecast, the snowfalls will reach to a lesser or greater extent territories located in the northern portion of the country in a strip that covers from east to west. Due to the unusual weather forecast, even in the middle of fall and 1 month before the official beginning of winter, meteorologists advanced that the possibility of extending the alert to other neighboring departments. The government of Honduras continues to send humanitarian aid to the communities affected by Tropical Storm Sara. The aid includes food, mattresses and water. The information was provided by the nation's Secretariat of Risk and Contingency Management on Tuesday, which also announced that 100 teams of experts are evaluating and registering the damages caused by the storm. It began its effect on Honduras last Thursday in the region of the Caribbean Sea coast bordering Nicaragua. We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok as well. For TeleSUR English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.